parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, I bid you a warm welcome to the first episode in the course in values. In this series, we will be covering the contents of all 8 modules of the textbooks of the Postgraduate Diploma in Education in Values and Spirituality, prepared by the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University. We will be unpacking subjects like the definition of values, what they are and what they're not, the different types of values, and how to put them into practice. We will also look at how to resolve ethical dilemmas and how to formulate values that apply in challenging situations in our lives. The emphasis in this course includes expanding your intellectual grasp of values and developing your capacity to implement them into the various areas of your life. Our speaker, Sister Denise Lawrence, is the author of this series of 8 books. She has a BA Honours degree in Philosophy and Modern Languages. Sister Denise has immersed herself in spirituality since 1974, and what you are about to hear in the episodes to follow is the wisdom and experience that she has gleaned from her 42 years of spiritual practice. What you do with this course material and what you make of the study material is entirely up to you. In this course, there are no exams. This course is not for a qualification, but for a life purpose. And by this we mean your practical life. You are invited to use this course material to scrutinize your life with the aim of modifying your character. We invite you to create your own set of values and develop the power and skill to live by them. Sister Denise, it's wonderful to have you back for an entire fresh new series.
Thank you.
Now, Sister Denise, before we go into the text itself, I want to spend the first couple of episodes asking you about a number of aspects that had arisen in my mind once I read these books as to what made you embark on this ambitious project. So the first question I have for you is, when did you write these books?
Yeah, the books were written between 2001 and 2006. So it took about 5 years to complete.
Could you tell us what was happening in your life at the time that you wrote the books?
Actually, I had moved from where I had been living in America for previous 25 years and moved to India specifically to work on this course. And what had been happening before that for about 2 years, I had had some very severe illness, which gave me the time and the opportunity to do a lot of introspection. So I was looking at working with the spiritual knowledge that we study in Brahma Kumaris to really make it into a practical thing, which could be a course for use at the level of higher education.
I'm so curious as to why you would do it. What was your motivation?
You know, since I was a small child, I've always lived by extremely high ideals. Very often accused of being an incorrigible idealist, but with no plans to change that. So I have a vision of what a human being can be, and of course that also starts with oneself. And I think oneself is the ideal laboratory with which to work. You know, there are many people, they say things, but then that's for other people. And I think the importance of this type of work is to have a commitment that you can't say anything that you're not actually doing yourself. And when you're talking to anybody about these things, one of those people you're talking to is yourself. So the role of being student-teacher in a course like this is very interesting, because you're always doing this for yourself, and there may be many, many people who are, in a way, life students with you. So the purpose of life, to me, is to achieve this state of being absolutely right with yourself. And I found in the process of the course that I changed my ideas about values and about spirituality, which was a very interesting process.
I understand that the Indian Commission had stated at some point that there was a need for values in education in India. Do you remember that?
Well, after independence, when India set up the constitution, they looked at India, which had gained independence after centuries of being under colonial rule. And 3 commissions were put together. All 3 of them concluded that there was a problem of values, and the solution was to build education in values into the education system. So they asked different spiritual and religious organizations to offer courses. And the Brahma Kumaris was asked, and this was in around 1999, 2000. And I had said to the organization that my interest is in preparing university level courses about the spiritual knowledge. So they asked me, they said, we have an agreement to make this, and you are the one assigned to do this. And so I began this in 2000, 2001.
You said the Brahma Kumaris was asked to do this. Who within the Brahma Kumaris asked you to write these books?
Well, the administrative heads.
Okay.
And those who are specifically concerned with making agreements with government organizations. So at the highest level, they asked me to do this. Yeah.
Sister Denise, you mentioned that you commenced writing these books from the year 2000 to 2006. And because of your history, having lived in the United States, I was just wondering how 9/11 had impacted on the work that you were doing?
Well, the events of 9/11 happened in a couple of months into the writing of the material. And it didn't impact specifically, but what happened in the world after that is everything changed. The whole issue of security and people's preoccupation with terrorism and the rise of the ISIS and all of this started to happen, and people were asking questions: what is happening in the world? How come we have reached a situation where we have to be so worried about personal security and start to look at each other in a hostile manner due to religious affiliation or belief systems? So that had to be taken into consideration.
If one has to look back in human history, there's been numbers of books, thousands of books written on values in education. Why did this not work before? This, what you've written in these books is, it's not brand new, is it? My question is, why hasn't it worked before? What is the difference between what is contained in this as opposed to what is written in the past?
Well, this was my position when I was asked to do this. First of all, I said, you want to have some education written for India, and I'm not an Indian. I come from a different angle, a different culture. Why do you want me to do this? And their answer was, they said, you're a neutral person. I said, no, I'm not neutral at all. I'm very biased towards spirituality, towards integrity, and towards an international angle on humanity. So I don't believe that I'm qualified to do something specifically for India. Why do you not ask somebody, you know, from an Indian background? They said, no, we want a neutral person. So that's you. So I said, all right, I'll do that. And then I said, you have all these courses written by brilliant philosophers. What is the point of me doing one more? And if you want one more, it means the other ones didn't work. So why would I do something else that also doesn't work? And this was an issue for me personally. So when I was preparing to write, the first thing I had to do is to investigate why the courses didn't work. And I came up with some conclusions about that, which are quite interesting. And one of them is that they were based on a large number of preconceptions which were never challenged.
What type of preconceptions?
One preconception is they didn't differentiate between values, ethics, morality, virtues. It was all lumped in as one and the same thing. And as I was investigating it, I found that no, these are not one and the same thing because they have a different source. I found that the values that people believe in were written about by the elite patriarchy in any particular community, whether it's Hindu or Buddhist or Christian or Jewish or whatever. Didn't make much difference, the religious affiliation or the culture. The thing that made the difference was that it was the elite patriarchy that decided on the ethics and values, and in every case they were skewed. So there was a bias which favored the elite patriarchy and was biased against women, children, animals, and the natural world, plants, minerals. Then when you look at virtues, you find it's not coming from that source, it's coming from a divine source. So there was quite a divergence there. And also I found that I developed a problem with ethics and morality because of 4 or 5 particular issues. One is that morality is the opinion of the people in power in any particular community, and it generally was the opinion of the patriarchy. Secondly, that it was always enforced through the use of violence. Thirdly, I found that it caused people to become progressively dishonest in order to avoid the punishments. I found that it encouraged corruption, and I found that it was very imbalanced. And so consequently, if you take something which maybe from the viewpoint of those who articulated it looked very good, but then you project it into the future, contained within itself is that it will result in moral decline, which is exactly what it did. Now, in the spiritual practice that I do with Raj Yoga at the Brahma Kumaris, we look at virtues, and the source of virtues is defined as God. God is not a human, and the relationship between a human and God is very different from the relationship between a human in a position of power with other humans who are not in a position of power. The relationship of God as the source of power and virtues is the provider. And so we look at virtue and power as a legacy that you have to claim as a child of God. And you claim this through the cultivation of your relationship with God. And then what God teaches is the laws of karma. In humanity, what you get is the legislature. And the legislature looks at human crimes and punishment and tries to contain what is defined as the fundamental tendency in humanity to do wrong. From the angle of God, the definition of a human being, a child of His, is that the human soul is fundamentally pure, peaceful, powerful, loving, blissful. But that all souls are spiritually depleted. These qualities within souls are at a low ebb. And when they come into a low ebb, the space that is left by the loss of these qualities is filled with what is called darkness or emptiness. So this darkness, this lack of power, is the reason why a person would do an act against their conscience or against their better nature. And so to punish a person for being weak is not going to improve them. So the function of God in this area is to restore the soul to its original full complement of purity, peace, power, love, bliss. So when a soul is filled with these energies, then the way that soul will act and interact corresponds with those qualities. And that is called light or illumination or intelligence. And so you have a vast difference in the approach from the angle of God or from the angle of the patriarchy. And these approaches, when you analyze them in this way, you have to decide which one is likely to be effective. And so from my angle, if it is the case that a person performs negative action because of weakness, then trying to make them good by punishing them is doomed to failure. A person who does negative action because of weakness, what do they need? They need knowledge, they need encouragement, they need love, they need support, they need direction, and they need to know how to charge their soul so that they are restored to their natural goodness. And so it's really looking at these two things and how it plays out historically and societally that we're looking at this course.
I was going to ask you as the next question as to whether your course works, but I think you've already answered that question. Would you like to say more anyway?
I took a sample of 10,000 people from many countries in the world, many different cultures, and I put them through the course. And I tested them according to pretty conventional systems of sociological evaluation. And I found that there is a discernible difference in people who practice meditation and spiritual development. Even though the difference is relatively small, it was very, very clearly discernible. I found that that being the case, we can conclude that it works. The other thing that it did, the way that I was teaching the course was to get people to think. And in the sort of patriarchal angle, the underlying attitude is really to prevent people from thinking, to get people to comply, to not get people to decide whether or not they agree with the rules. They have to abide by the rules. The angle I took was, okay, here are the various rules. Do you agree with them? Because if you don't agree with them, you're not going to follow them. And so I used the system of dialogue. I got people to really use their conscience. And because my belief is, and my observation is, that people do tend to go against their conscience quite a lot. So I also had to figure out, why does a person go against their own belief systems and their own conscience. And again, my conclusion is because they're not strong enough to follow it. It takes a lot of power to actually live according to your own conscience. People think that it costs you to do a wrong action, but it costs you much more to do a right action.
Yes, I think it is. What impact did you hope that this course will have on your students?
I always want something to have an impact on me.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. Because it really forced me to do very, very deep, rigorous personal inventory. And I mean, I was doing that anyway, so this course in a way came out of that. I like freedom. It's a very high value for me, freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of movement. And I saw around me many people who are afraid, who are dominated by aggressive people, who can easily be manipulated. And what I wanted to do was to provide people with tools to be able to be free from those machinations, those manipulations. And I wanted people to learn how to perform moral reasoning and how to develop critical thinking. And some people think critical thinking means thinking thoughts that are critical about other people. That's not critical thinking, Critical thinking means to be able to evaluate the difference of different positions, different stances that a person could take. I wanted people to be able to learn how to defend their position, their moral position, their ethics, and so on, and to be able to live by it, you see. So it's all about actually empowering people.
In preparation for this course, I went through all 8 books, and I read it more than once. And what is very obvious is that you had in mind very strong intellectuals when you wrote this, okay? Is this your target audience?
Yeah, I'm not looking at academics, but one thing I'm remembering is I was working together with a very excellent editor, Rose Kelly, from the Isle of Man, and she and I spent days, weeks, months discussing each and every point so that we could really articulate it clearly. And she's a very high caliber thinker also, and very well versed in spiritual knowledge. So working together with somebody like this was good. Then my target audience, I don't believe in, top down. People would say to me, you should do this for the children. They need this. And I checked, and I said, the children are clean. They are not corrupt. They learn to be corrupt through their relationship with the adults. And it's once you become an adult and you have to deal with incredible pressures from society which make you hypocritical, have double standards, get corrupt. And so my target audience is really parents, teachers, religious leaders, because these are the external moral authorities.
Most values in education courses are aimed at children, and your target audience is adults?
Yes.
That's a surprise.
Yes, because the children are influenced by the adults, and they're with their parents every day. They're with their teachers every day. They're with their religious leaders many times in the week. So these external moral authorities are the most substantial impact on the children. And just one little book is not going to do any good if the external moral authorities are giving a different message. Also, these matters requires sophisticated intelligence. Children do not have the life experience, they do not have the expertise, they do not have the maturity to handle this stuff. This is really for the plus 40s, you know.
I think we'd better stop here. We've come to the end of a rather fascinating half an hour. And as you see, this is just an introductory episode. And Sister Denise has taken us through why she's written these books, what was going on through her life as she was writing these books, who her target audience is. And what struck me is that this book is a series that was designed for adults and not children. So I would invite all of you who are watching to give us a few weeks of your time when all the episodes will be available to you. And I would also invite you to try and get hold of a series of the Values in Education series, which is available from Sister Denise at the Brahma Kumari's headquarters in Mount Abu, so that you could go through this text and see what is applicable to you and see how you can apply it in your daily life. If you've enjoyed this episode, I invite you to go through all of the 8 books so that you can see where you are at and see how you can improve the quality of your life through values in education. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Sister Denise.
Thank you.
Take care and goodbye.